Shut up, compressor. Hey everyone, Matt here with Duke's Models, and welcome to the Pony Bash. Okay, welcome to the 7th and final installment of the Pony Bash. It's been quite a journey getting here, but the Mustang is done. Now I think I'm going to approach this similar to how I approached the wrap-up of the Pony Bash, and first talk about what I've done since the last installment, and then kind of end with a wrap-up and my thoughts on the kit and all that stuff. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take the canopy off so it doesn't fly off, and I'm going to go ahead and yank the prop off as well so that I can actually pick this thing up. Now first, on the prop, again, this is aftermarket, solid resin spinner, resin props. I haven't done much to this because the photos honestly just don't show much. The props are relatively clean. They're not all that chipped. I've added some, some very light, not really chipping, but more paint abrasion on the back, on the face, and sort of on the back where it's still black. I added some Starship filth oil and some dark gray and things like that, just to sort of dirty them up a bit. And you can see that kind of popping through on the yellow tips in places. Doesn't show up as much, especially on camera, on the prop. It does show up in person and basically makes these look a little bit less just uniform black-ish. So that's the prop. And I will say I was very pleasantly surprised how well the blades fit into the spinner. They're basically like semicircles or D-shaped holes that they mount into, so they just locate exactly where they need to be. Nice and easy. So on the kit itself, when we left off, I had just masked and sprayed all the markings. So those got touched up where they needed, especially with like the lifting back here on the H. And honestly, I've never really solved why the paint was lifting. The best thing I can think is that I was using super matte black, and I think I threw in some Mr. Rapid Thinner. And those and very conservative spraying may have led to the paint just drying before it made contact, and that made it just very susceptible to lifting. That's the only thing I can really think of. Anyway, after that, I went in and added various stencils in places. The tails back here, this little data plate under the windscreen, some little stencils on the cowl, and some stencils on the aileron. And Edward's really fucked up no step line on the flap, which, looking later after it had been applied, is really supposed to follow the chord of the wing, not so much this weird, this weird italic angle that Edward has on it. So next time I will just paint that damn thing. Anyway, those worked exactly the way that some of the newer Edward decals are working, where you can put it down, let it sit, and then come back and peel off the carrier film, and that is fucking awesome. So that gives me a lot of excitement, honestly, for future Edward Mustangs, because they do some really cool markings and they throw in a lot of great stencils. And even though this one doesn't have that many stencils because of the overpainting and the invasion stripes, some of the other ones I want to do don't. And so the ability to play with basically wet transfers is a huge motivator for me. So those got taken care of, and then it was time to start installing things. Let's see, where do we want to start? Let's start on the underside. The tail strut assembly is really kind of janky. It's not terrible, but it's kind of janky. The tail wheel, the resin tail wheel, is a very loose fit onto the axle itself. And I would have loved to have seen that a bit tighter. I think next time I might put a bit of effort into maybe filling that and then drilling it out to a smaller diameter. I didn't do that this time, and I probably should have. The gear struts were one of the things that honestly terrified me when I first started on this build, because they have a little tiny, tiny wedge on the top of them where they mount into the gear bay. And going about it and just testing it and fitting it like normal, it is all kinds of fucked up and will not fit at all. However, I found out just kind of with fiddling around with it that if you put them in, rotate it at an angle, and then twist them, you can see there's like on the back of this one over here, you can see a little nub and there's another one up front. And basically what happens is those lock into the front and back of the gear bay and provide a very solid fit. Almost solid enough that you don't need glue. I opted for glue anyway just because I don't want to take chances with that, and everything worked out fine. The gear doors also mount extremely well. These center ones, they kind of like hook up under that little cross piece running between them, and they basically hug it and just stay there. And so all you need is a little dab of some sort of PVA glue to hold them in place. The doors that mount to the struts, and they fit nicely into the little holes for them in the wings. Everything is great. Very, very well done there. I definitely did fuck up the lower radiator area down here. I somehow managed to erase like all the detail and leave a ghost seam. Yay on me. Fortunately, that is on the very bottom of the kit, where nobody should be looking anyway. Then coming back here after that with all the radiator junk, one thing that you see on a lot of sort of shots of Mustangs from the underside, you see a tendency for leaks coming out of the cowl to sort of flow back along the aircraft, get directed between the gear doors, and kind of also off the gear doors where they spin off to the sides a little bit. But they collect and they go around the radiator, and then they flow down off the sides of it there, and probably also out of it, to be honest, and just create a big old mess down here. And that's exactly what I've been trying to recreate. Also a little bit of baking of the paint, because the invasion stripes and the heat from the radiator housing probably didn't get along very well. So that's what's going on right there. Up here, the exhaust stacks, these are the Edward Brasson exhaust stacks. They're pretty damn good. The only complaint that I have is that the actual exhaust stubs themselves feel really, really small. They're definitely smaller than the ones I used in the Ultracast ones I used on the F-51. And maybe just due to my being more accustomed with 132nd these days, these just feel really small. Who knows? But they did the job. They fit nicely, all that kind of stuff. There are actually handy little notes on the bottom of them where they get fitted into the fuselage that say left and right. So you can't really mess them up too much. Moving on to the upper weathering, the exhaust stains were started with an airbrush and then followed up with oils, a lot of tans, a lot of sepias, things like that, blending into dust, cream brown, and faded white back here with the washout area around the insignia. And then some sepia, starship filth, and whatnot along the wing roots. The overpainted invasion stripes were heavily messed up with all kinds of oils. So the darker stripes got sepia and starship filth, both from the ABT 502 line. The lighter stripes got a mix of olive green and neutral gray and cream brown and dust and whatnot, just to lighten them up. And the olive green added a nice bit of saturation and visual contrast from the darker stripes. So yeah, that's pretty much that. Okay, so that's pretty much the story of the build and the finish out. So what did I make of the kit overall? To be honest, Eduard's Mustang is hands down the best P-51 in 1/48 scale. There's just not even a comparison. I mean, I built it alongside an Airfix and a Meng that both got just tossed out because they came nowhere close. And that led me to start up a Tamiya kit because it's, it is the standard, the gold standard up until this kit's release for a 48 scale Mustang. And honestly, it doesn't stand anywhere close to this in pretty much any terms. The only place that the Tamiya Mustang beats out the Eduard Mustang is the upper cowl, because on the Eduard Mustang, it's all integral with the fuselage and suffers some severe detail fade as you go towards the center. Plus, you have to join the center and somehow maintain that split line. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. The Tamiya kit still wins in that regard, but in every other regard, this kit owns it. the detail, the complexity, honestly the fit in most places. Yeah, it's got it. One thing I would say though is that I don't think Edward does a great job of explaining exactly how this kit works. And what I mean by that is a lot of it doesn't go together the way that a typical kit goes together. This is the first one I've experienced that kind of acts the way it does. And I've been describing it as sucking in reverse. So if you think about most aircraft kits, you pull it out of the box, you grab the wings and the fuselage off the sprue, you grab some tape, you throw them together for a quick test fit. And that'll give you pretty much a sense of how things are going to go. And then as you start adding gear bays and cockpits and engines and whatnot, that's where you introduce fit problems, and you have to fix them and get back to that sort of initial, hey, this goes together pretty well type of state. This one is the exact opposite. When you do your first test fit, it sucks. The fuselage barely holds together. The wings are all squirrely. The curve of the wings doesn't match the curve of the wing root. It's just a mess. And then as you start adding stuff, it actually helps form the kit the way it should be. So the cockpit helps locate the fuselage and helps locate the bits for the radiator housing and all that kind of stuff. The gear bays help locate the wings themselves, and they help literally provide a thing for the upper surfaces to form a curve against that perfectly matches the wing root. It's not something that I've really encountered before, and I really wish Edward took a little bit of time in the instructions to say, hey, this is going to be messed up at this point. Keep going, because this piece will help this piece do that. And I think that would probably save a lot of the headaches that people have been having with this kit, as, being aware that it doesn't work like your typical aircraft kit. I think the gear struts and the way that they have to be sort of rotated and installed at an angle and then kind of twisted into place and then they lock in, that's one of those things that's not in the instructions. The instructions literally just say, like, put this here, like that. And if you try to do that, you're going to be fucked. And so it's a great kit, but it's maybe the documentation isn't there. So anybody building this, I would very strongly recommend kind of stepping back and thinking about the build as you build it, and that will do you wonderful service. So would I build one of these again? You bet your ass I would. I've actually just ordered the new F6 kit, the photo recon version, and it may be on my bench much earlier than I was anticipating building another Mustang. Who knows? But yeah, so many little touches in this thing are fantastic. I mean, honestly, even like the tip lights being separate clear pieces that kind of slot into the ends of the wings, love it. There's just so many wonderful little touches on this thing. Now, I have heard that the underside, like if you want to mount tanks or bombs to the racks, apparently that is a huge pain in the ass. I haven't tried it yet. This one, most of the photos have it flying clean, so I took that as an excuse to not fuck with that. But yeah, it looks like it could be a bit of a squirrely fit down there. So that's maybe one area to pay attention to. Other than that, though, yeah, this is a great kit. I highly recommend it. If you are wanting to build a Mustang in 1/48 scale, grab the Edward. There's really no excuse for doing otherwise. You can get this thing for cheaper or a little bit more expensive than pretty much all the other kits out there. And it's just so much better in every regard. So yeah, I didn't get this thing done by October 1st like I was hoping to. It ended up taking 2 more months, but I'm absolutely thrilled with the way that it built, and I'm pretty happy with the way it's come out. And this will not be my last Edward Stang. So thanks for following along with the series. I'm going to go take some final photos now, and catch you later.